for the Capitol on January 17th. And more fallout for the president could come as early as Monday, as House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says he could face a new impeachment trial for the role that he may have played in the attack. Helping us sort through the very latest developments, a trio of NBC News correspondents with the latest reporting. I'm also going to speak with national security analyst Frank Figliuzzi as well. First, let's get the latest from the White House. That's where a muted and isolated Donald Trump could become the first president to be impeached twice. NBC's Josh Letterman is in Washington for us. Josh, again with the welcome. Are we hearing anything from the White House as more lawmakers are demanding his resignation? And look at tech companies across the country. They're pulling the plug on his social media.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Alex, how these two issues are now, in fact, converging, because typically when something like this were to occur, the House pursuing fresh impeachment charges against the president, he would be most likely to take to his favorite platform, Twitter, to make his views about that known. But, of course, the president unable to do so. The White House did release a statement from the president via another Twitter handle that they control last night, the @POTUS account, which is an official government account, in which the president said that he essentially does not think that they should go forward with impeachment with just 12 days left, calling that something that would be divisive as opposed to what he says is a time for healing at this point. Of course, the president not exactly acting in a healing capacity in his actions that helped contribute to that riot that we saw at the Capitol earlier this week. But now we're hearing from the president's family members as well. Donald Trump Jr., the president's son, calling the actions by Twitter to take him off of their platform a full frontal assault on free speech. But Democrats moving ahead anyway with their attempt to try for the first time in history to impeach a president for the second time. Take a listen to what Democratic Congressman Hakeem Jeffries had to say about that this morning.
We are proceeding with every available means that is at our disposal in order to ensure that Donald Trump is removed. That's the objective. Yes, he is in the Twitter penalty box. He still has access to the nuclear codes. And so every minute, every hour, every day, every week that he's in office is a threat to the health and safety of the United States of America, our democracy, and its citizens.
And that's why Democrats say Plan A should be for the president to simply resign, take himself out of office without the need to force him. Plan B, according to the Democrats, would be for the cabinet and Mike Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment. But that is looking decreasingly likely, as some of the cabinet members who would be most likely to actually act on that are instead resigning themselves. And so Democrats instead left with Plan C, which is this attempt to try to impeach him a second time in the House. Of course, then that would have to go to the Senate for a trial where it's unlikely they can actually move to try, convict, and remove the president with so few days left in his term.
Yeah,
Alex?
That's absolutely a lot of the issue. Okay, Josh, thank you for that. While Democrats are at least attempting to move ahead on impeachment, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is throwing cold water on that move. Let's go to NBC's Sahil Kapoor, who's joining me now. I have a feeling you're going to pick up where Josh left off, Sahil. What are lawmakers saying about all this?
Alex, there's anger, there's fury, there's dismay, and most notably among Democrats, there's determination to do something about President Trump. They don't want to be the opposition party that sits back and doesn't act on something as grave as this. Now, the top two Democrats in Congress, Nancy Pelosi in the House and Chuck Schumer in the Senate, have said that the president should resign, the cabinet should remove him. As Josh pointed out, that is looking highly unlikely, and the only option they have here, if that doesn't happen, is impeachment. They're already circulating among Democrats articles of impeachment. One single article called Incitement of Insurrection that accuses the president of willfully inciting violence against the government of the United States, a charge every bit as serious as it sounds. That is an article of impeachment that Democrats appear likely to take up as early as next week if there's no intervening action between then. Let's take a listen to what Speaker Pelosi said on 60 Minutes, capturing how she feels about this.
Sadly, the person who's running the executive branch is a deranged, unhinged, dangerous president of the United States. And only a number of days until we can be protected from him. But he has done something so serious that there should be prosecution against him.
Well, I gather that the 25th Amendment is off the table.
No, it isn't. Nothing is off the table.
Now, the Speaker has even inquired about the President's access to the nuclear codes to give you a sense of where her mind is at the moment. The biggest problem for Democrats at this point is the calendar. President Trump has only 11 days in office left, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, the top Republican, has not explicitly taken a position on the issue of impeachment and conviction, but he is quietly throwing cold water on the idea by circulating a memo pointing out that without unanimous consent, which is how the Senate does pretty much anything quickly, it is not going to be able to receive any articles of impeachment on January 19th. That is one day before President-elect Biden takes office. That puts Democrats in a position of deciding, do they want to spend some of the early days of Joe Biden's presidency focusing on impeaching and convicting the previous president? The last thing here to keep in mind, the main utility of throwing Donald Trump out of office via impeachment and conviction would be to prevent him from running for office again. Under the Constitution, he is entitled to seek a second term. There are rumors that he might do that in 2024. If Democrats pursue the article of impeachment and are able to convict him, a big if, they intend to include language to bar him from ever running for president again. Alex?
Yeah, you've given us a very realistic breakdown on what's to come, but I had that conversation with Melissa Murray, an NYU law professor, of exactly if that could be accomplished in the last hour. Thank you, Sahil, for that. Right now, of course, many questions remain over the security failure at the Capitol as officials race to figure out what in the world went wrong. NBC's national security correspondent Ken Delanian is joining us from Washington. Ken, welcome to you, my friend. So what are the biggest questions that remain about how all this happened?
Hey, Alex. Well, so it's now very clear that the Capitol Police utterly failed in their mission to protect the Capitol, and that's why the chief of that 2,000-member force is resigning. But now questions are turning to what appears to be a larger and massive intelligence failure on the part of the FBI and other federal agencies who utterly failed to see the evidence right in front of them on social media that this was going to happen. A foreign diplomat based in Washington told me he knew that the Capitol building was going to be attacked. Our colleagues at NBC News have uncovered a raft of postings on social media from the days before this event. Let me just read one as an example. You can go to Washington on January 6th and help storm the Capitol, one person posted the day before the riot. We will storm government buildings, kill cops, kill security guards, kill federal employees and agents, and demand a recount. And yet, Alex, the FBI, the D.C. chief of police, and other top government officials are telling reporters that they had no indication that there was anything but peaceful protests. Let's take a listen to some of what these people have been saying yesterday.
No indication that there was anything other than First Amendment protected activity.
There was no intelligence that suggested there would be a breach of the U.S. Capitol.
Overall, the assessment that we got repeatedly was no indications of significant violent protest.
So, Alex, those comments don't pass the laugh test, but it's not just that these people are incompetent. There's a larger issue here, and Frank Flaguzzi will talk to you about it in a minute, which is that the FBI does not have the same authorities to look at domestic extremist content on the internet that they do international terrorist content, because there is no domestic terrorism law, Alex. And that is something that I think is going to get a lot of attention in the coming days. Why do these gaps exist in our laws? Why weren't authorities able to see the very obvious threats on social media and pass them on to the relevant authorities, including the Capitol Police, who might have been much better prepared for the riot that they didn't see coming, Alex?
Those three sound bites were just shocking. I mean, to your point, they didn't pass the laugh test. But you know what's disturbing about this? I'm going to pick this up with Frank right now. This sounds a lot, Ken, like what we were talking about 20 years ago in the wake of 9/11, right? I mean, how it's like the left hand wasn't able to know what the right hand was doing. And I mean, what do you mean the FBI can't take a look at what's happening domestically? I mean, well, okay, you know what?
There's a very similar dynamic, Alex. You're absolutely right. There are gaps in the law. Because there's no domestic terrorism statute and no material support to domestic terrorism, the FBI needs an open case, essentially a criminal predicate, to go look at American social media. And after all, there's a First Amendment. People have a right to speak, and they have a right to be free from government snooping until they cross the line into violence, which they clearly did. But if the FBI isn't looking, they don't see that. And now, of course, they're poring over social media postings, gathering evidence of the misdeeds that all these people committed. But in the days before this, either they weren't looking or they didn't analyze it, and they certainly didn't pass it on to the people that needed that information, Alex.
Ken, thank you so much. As you rightly said, I'm going to be joined right now by Frank Figliuzzi, our colleaague. Frank, of course, for all of you, the MSNBC national security contributor, former assistant director for counterintelligence at the FBI, also author of The FBI Way, Inside the Bureau's Code of Excellence. Frank, what do you make of what Ken pointed out there? I mean, seriously, that the FBI doesn't have authority, doesn't have the jurisdiction to look at social media domestically and say, these are not just crackpots. There's a dangerous precedent being set here.
Yeah, Alex, first, I consider Ken Delaney to be a close friend and colleague. We work closely together, but I've got to respectfully disagree with his characterization of this as an FBI failure for the very reason that Ken cited after he made that comment, which is this is a failure of legislation. The FBI is not permitted to look and monitor at the very same things that you and I can sit at home and look at Twitter and on Parler. I saw this playing out. Lots of people saw this playing out for at least the last 2 weeks, to include specific posts about, quote, overwhelming the Capitol Police, quote, how to breach the barriers in front of the Capitol. But here's the problem. We don't have a domestic terrorism law in the United States. If you switched this over and changed the religion of these folks from Christianity to Islam and changed their skin color from white to brown, international terrorism laws would have kicked in. If they were going to do it for an ideology related to jihad or establishing a caliphate, the FBI would have had the investigative toolkit available to them to monitor, track, insert informants in chat rooms and websites, and develop undercover agents inside these groups. We can't do that because there is no domestic terrorism law that looks anything like. There is no domestic terrorism law, and unlike the international side that allows proactive response.
So I'm going to ask you, in your opinion, Frank, A, should there be, and does that mean you're telling me, I'm just trying to look at this real practically, right? You have an FBI agent, and at the end of the day, when that agent leaves his or her office, takes off his or her badge, gets home, starts looking at things on the internet, happens upon this, has the knowledge of what they have read, they are not legally allowed to come back into the office the next day and say, guys, there was something I read that was concerning. They can't discuss that among their colleagues?
That's because yes, you're right. And that's because the American people have decided they don't want that. And maybe it's time to change that, because in the past years, there have been proposed bills in the House and the Senate to deal with the lack of domestic terrorism legislation. So yeah, the FBI agents abide by the law, and they don't do something that they're not allowed to do. Here's, as Ken referred to it, here's what has to happen. There has to be an articulation of violence that they're moving down the path. It's being planned specifically, and then someone has to alert, since the FBI is not inside those groups, someone has to alert them to it, unlike the international Islamic extremist violent jihadists. Remember the plot by a militia to kidnap the governor of Michigan?
Sure.
One of those people associated with that group had to come forward to law enforcement and say, they're disturbing even me. They're getting too violent for me. That's how law enforcement got onto this.
So we have the social media website Parler, and that one has certainly been filled with violent rhetoric from Trump supporters, and that all since Wednesday's mayhem. Google has suspended the app from its store. Apple's threatening to do the same. What exactly is Parler, Frank? Who's using it? Is it something we could see the president get on now that he's been permanently suspended from Twitter?
Oh, I think we're likely. So let's address what Parler is. Parler has become the alternate go-to place now for the extremist fringe, who feel that their freedom of speech is being infringed upon when you get censored, blocked, suspended from Twitter or other social media platforms. It's run by some very wealthy people. There are even some prominent Fox television hosts associated with it, and they're all migrating in droves over to Parler, to the point where it might even have crashed recently or will be about to crash. And here's the good news, bad news. So Twitter blocks the president, right? But now you force him to move over to Parler, and now you have a place where he can lead more quietly an entire insurgency inside this nation if we're not careful and we don't wrap our hands around legislation that can govern social media.
Pretty chilling, that prospect. Let's take a listen to the New York Times, which has offered up audio of the chants from inside the Capitol building. They were suggesting that Mike Pence then became a target after the president targeted him in a tweet. Here's an excerpt, Frank, from the Daily podcast. Take a listen.
You hear dozens of people shouting, "Where is Pence? Where is Pence? Find Pence."
Wow. You know, there are also pictures of a rioter seen inside the Senate chambers right there. Those are zip ties in his hands. We also saw people walking around with police shields and wearing police uniform parts that suggest they had picked up police property. What does all this tell you, Frank, about the motives of some of those rioters that got inside?
Well, first, on the first question about targeting the Pence, that is directly tied to language from President Trump. That simply would not have happened if President Trump hadn't singled out Vice President Pence as, quote, not doing his job. And to see the images of Pence's Secret Service detail drawing weapons inside the Congress is astounding to me. But with regard to where this is going and what it says about the president and who's inside, we're also disturbed by the proliferation of tattoos and insignia that relate to, and clothing, that relate to white supremacy, Norse mythology that has been adapted by white supremacists, T-shirts that have a code that says 6 million was not enough with regard to the Holocaust. So this tells you a whole lot about who these people are. And in addition, add the very disturbing possibility that some current or former police and or military were involved in organizing this. This gets back to the FBI's role here. Don't be surprised if they're taking a very methodical approach to an organizational strategy to take down organizational leaders of these of this insurrection.
Let me ask you on the heels of that. The FBI says that there is no indication Antifa members disguised themselves as pro-Trump supporters to provoke Wednesday's mob, but that is certainly a claim repeated by several Republican lawmakers, Frank. What are some of the key factors when you identify Antifa members compared to the Wednesday rioters? What do you look for to prove that Antifa was not a part of this?
Well, first, you mentioned Parler earlier. We've seen plans on Parler for these groups like Proud Boys to dress like Antifa, whatever that means, and Black Lives Matter, and disguise themselves so that they look like that. So there would be video imagery that would confuse people. And now Parler is picking that up, and people are believing it all over the country. So it's essential for the truth to come out. That's why you're hearing law enforcement say there's zero evidence that happened. And in fact, you'll remember back several months when the FBI director, Chris Wray, testified on the Hill that in fact, and this really upset the president, that in fact they weren't seeing violence committed by Antifa as an organized effort and group, but rather that Antifa was an ideology.
Exactly. Okay, Frank Figliuzzi, much appreciated for this conversation. There may be a number of clues about what happened Wednesday that were ignored or simply overlooked, and that includes what the president's former personal attorney said 2 years ago. Michael Cohen, who say President Trump should be removed from office for inciting Wednesday's riots. And my next guest is one of those Democrats. Joining me now is Senator Debbie Stabenow, Democrat from Michigan. Senator, welcome back to the broadcast. It's good to see you, ma'am. I'd like to play something that Daniel Goldman said last night. It was on All In with Chris Hayes, and get your reaction on the other side. Here it is.
You are sort of trampling on the ordinary process of impeachment just to get to try to remove him. Yeah. But that's not going to happen before January 20th. Like, everyone needs to be clear. He will not be removed by the Senate before January 20th. So what are you trying to gain through impeachment? It's unclear to me that it's worth the time and energy, practically speaking, because it's not going to work.
Senator, what do you make of that?
Well, Alex, first, it's always great to be with you. And I would say that basically we have two things we're trying to accomplish right now. One is to hold this president accountable for something unimaginable and un-American. And this was not American to have this insurgency that cost people's lives. And he needs to be held accountable along with the people involved. But secondly, how do we make sure that more people aren't hurt? or killed as a result of his reckless actions in the next 11 days? So that's the question. The best thing to do, of course, is for the vice president to work with the cabinet to use the 25th Amendment. And instead of the cabinet officials, the secretaries, running away right now at the last minute, they ought to be staying if they care about the country and helping to remove him. But short of that, the issue then becomes, again, impeachment. And so it is something that, at minimum, the House impeaching him will put him on record as the first president ever in the history of the country to have had that happen twice. The second thing is that if he would be removed, or at least even after the swearing in of President Joe Biden be actually convicted, it would at least make sure that he can't run again, and he would lose any salary and pension and so on. So these are not, certainly impeachment is not a good option because of the time frame. Right. 25th Amendment is much better. But we also have to make sure that he can't proceed to do the kinds of outrageous, dangerous things that will get people hurt or killed in the next 11 days. And there's absolutely no, we have no confidence that he's not going to try to do that.
There are some of your Republican colleagues, I'm sure you've heard them, who argue that another impeachment trial would only create further division. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say this right now, that it's President Donald Trump and the people that haven't enabled him for the last 4 years. It's colleagues that stood up in violation of the 12th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution on Wednesday to try to overturn a duly elected American election that have caused the deep divisions in our country. We know that we need to work together to get things done, but there is no way that this is about, impeachment causing further division. The division is there right now. What we need is accountability. We need accountability. We need to support a new president moving forward to rebuild the country.
How about, Senator, two of the colleagues of whom you speak right there, Senators Hawley and Cruz, should they be held accountable for their actions?
I think that everyone that took specific actions to inflame this dangerous situation, this un-American situation, those who stood up in violation of the Constitution should be held accountable in some way. I do. And we certainly are seeing in their home states right now, their leading papers in their states calling on them to resign. They certainly are facing a lot of wrath of their own supporters. And I think that's appropriate. This was not a game. Mm-hmm. This is people that have been involved in this act like words mean nothing. And we know that's not true, particularly in the age of social media and the capacity to say anything, any conspiracy theory, and cause people to be afraid and angry and divided. Words matter, and particularly for those of us in elected positions, we have to have some sense of responsibility for the words that come out of our mouths, as well as the actions that we take.
You were on the Senate floor. There are images circulating of one of the rioters on Wednesday with zip ties, suggesting he was going to take hostages. Another was arrested for having a semi-automatic weapon and 11 Molotov cocktails. This all could have ended even worse. What's your reaction to all of that?
Well, Alex, it's frightening and it's heartbreaking at the same time. I think I'm still getting my head wrapped around it, because when we were in the chambers, we were listening to a debate on whether or not we should support an objection to the Arizona vote. And so we weren't watching TV. We didn't see what was happening all around us until it was right on us, until the vice president was quickly taken out of the room by Secret Service, and we were told to stay in our seats, and they were locking all the doors and so on. And so as we begin to see more and more of what could have happened, it's frightening. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And by the way, just as an aside, I think it's important. My daughter said to me yesterday, who has a kindergartner and third grader in school, Mom, I worry about this happening to to my kids every day who go to school, that they're going to be told to get in the corner under their desk because gunmen are coming into the school. So I hope that maybe my colleagues will have some sense of the horror of that, and maybe we can do something about that too.
The issue of gun control is something that should be taken up, and I hope that you're able to do so in this next term. Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan, thank you so much, ma'am, for your time. It was good to see you. Meantime, coming up next, 2 words, Michael Cohen, how his predictions about the president came true and what he thinks will happen next.
What do we want for dinner?
Burgers! I want a sugar cookie! I want a bucket of chicken! I want...
It's the easiest because it's the cheesiest. Kraft for the win-win.
Still fresh.
Unstoppable in-wash scent booster. Downy Unstoppables.
Fresh prepared meals made by chefs and nutritionists, fully cooked and ready to eat in 3 minutes. Wow, that's good. We don't have to cook anymore.
We don't have to cook anymore?
We don't have to cook anymore!
You don't have to cook anymore with Freshly. Now you can get nutritious, delicious meals delivered right to your door. Go to Freshly.com today.
When it's time to sell your house, there are lots of things that can go wrong. But HomeLight can help you get it right. If you need a great real estate agent, HomeLight will analyze all the agents from the top brokerages and find one who knows how to sell your home faster and for more money. Want to skip the stress of prep, listing, and open houses and close on your own timeline? HomeLight can connect you with a buyer who will pay cash for your home in a matter of days. No matter how you want to sell, HomeLight shows you all your options. Selling starts at HomeLight.
Cover it up. That's what I did when I started losing my hair. Then I realized I could actually do something. Now I use Keeps, the easiest way to keep my hair. And it only costs $1 a day, which means no more covering up. Get started at Keeps.com.
Guys, as we get older, we all lose testosterone. The Force Factor's Test X180 works to boost it back, build muscle, increase energy, fuel desire, and improve performance. Rush to Walmart for Test X180, the #1 fastest growing testosterone brand in America.
Given my experience working for Mr. Trump, I fear that if he loses the election in 2020, that there will never be a peaceful transition of power. And this is why I agreed to appear before you today.
Michael Cohen there, warning members of Congress nearly 2 years ago that he feared about what would happen if the president lost the election. And now the Trump administration is facing the fallout from a breach of the Capitol by the president's supporters, which came after 2 months of railing against the election results. President Trump now finally committing to a peaceful transfer of power. Take a listen.
Now Congress has certified the results. A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power.
Joining me now is President Trump's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen. Michael's the author of Disloyal and host of the podcast Mea Culpa with Michael Cohen. Given that, as I welcome you, my friend, given your reaction right there, I'm going to get to your reaction to the president's video. But you were right, Michael. How were you so sure that Trump would incite the masses the way that he did?
Because I know the man better than anybody, and it's really just a terrible display by Donald Trump in a very weak and a feeble attempt to keep power. And that's what Donald Trump was all about. And that was the whole purpose of him, in essence, running for president. It was to obtain the power, but really not even the power so that he could do good for America. It was really so that he could do better for his eponymous company, because that's really what the whole campaign was about. It was supposed to, in essence, be the greatest infomercial in the history of politics, but it didn't turn out that way, did it?
No. Do you think your testimony, Michael, just wasn't taken seriously enough?
I don't think it was taken seriously by many people at all. You know, there it was 20 months ago, basically telling you, almost like Nostradamus, what was going to happen 20 months later in the event that he lost the election.
And it's not the only thing that I stated. I had also stated that Donald Trump was a con man. He's a racist, a sexist, a misogynist, and many other things, all of which have also turned out to be proven to be true.
So you just scoffed at the president's video there saying that he's committed to a peaceful transfer of power. Why is that? And what more do you think could happen in the next 11 days? I mean, can you think of something that the president could be cooking up?
Sure. So one of the things that I also said 20 months ago was that Donald Trump speaks in code. And that's exactly what he did on Wednesday when we saw his behavior and we saw the statements that he was making. He certainly did not turn out and say, I want you, my MAGA supporters, I want you to go storm the Capitol. But if you look at the different pieces that he said, we cannot allow this to happen. Right? We have to take control. We have to show the power, and we're going to go walk to the Capitol. Now, yeah, he didn't say, let's go storm the Capitol. But when you have people who are riled up and willing to commit this seditious and this disgraceful behavior, Donald Trump knows exactly how to blow these dog whistles to get his MAGA supporters to behave in the despicable way that they did on Wednesday. And he knew exactly what he was doing. And I also stated before anybody else came out and said it, that I guarantee that Donald Trump was sitting there watching what was going on, and he was elated at the spectacle that he had created, watching people wearing MAGA flags as capes with the name Trump across it, watching people fighting with the police. He enjoys this tumult, and it's really terrible.
Is that, Michael, and there are reports that would back up your assessment there, is that because the president's more concerned with how this would reflect on him versus how this would reflect on our country?
Well, isn't it always about him? It has nothing to do with this country. It's always about Donald Trump. And the more people start to hear me, and I'm going to try to do what Trump does, which is to say things over and over and over again. And I'm going to say it again and again and again. Donald Trump does not care about anyone or anything other than himself.
How about
Donald Trump does not care about anyone or anything other than himself. And if we say that over and over again, maybe these supporters, these individuals that will now face criminal action, maybe they will understand that this man is setting them up like he set me up for a fall.
So if he doesn't care about anyone but himself, I mean, I then immediately think about his family, right? What do you think, First Lady Melania Trump, what do you think his kids are saying to him right now? Is there any reason to believe, Michael, that they're encouraging him to go quietly, you know, stand down, let's not have any more fights? Is there any chance they're urging him to just leave before January 20th?
There's nothing that they can say to him. He doesn't respect them. He basically only listens to them if they are in agreement with what he is doing. He has no respect for them, and he has made that clear, which I talk about ad nauseum in my book, Disloyal. So unless they're sitting there and they're acknowledging that things that he's saying and that things that he wants to do, then he pushes them out of the circle. And each one of the children are so desperate for love from their father. They have this longing need for love from their father that they're willing to even go along with this type of behavior, which is so undemocratic, which is so unprecedented in our history. It doesn't matter so long as that daddy gives them an acknowledgement and that they're by his side when this is all going on. It's really sad.
Michael, very quickly, I want to remind viewers that you said a couple months ago on this broadcast that the president would not be attending the inauguration. You were right. I'm just going to ask you how you think he's reacting to not having Twitter any longer.
Oh, this is for him not to have Twitter is for him like not to be able to eat a hamburger. This is like the worst thing in the world. Right? A Coke and I mean, you're taking away a child's toy because that's what it is to him. This is his ability to communicate with the masses that he has created this fiction in his head that he has 100 million supporters. So you are now taking away the oxygen for him to breathe by removing him from Twitter and social media. I mean, it's like now he's picking up the phone and he's wondering, well, why am I picking up the phone? Because his first reaction was to always go directly to Twitter to attack somebody.
Michael Cohen, good to see you, author of the blockbuster Disloyal and the podcast Mea Culpa with Michael Cohen. Come see me again soon. Thank you.
I will. Next time with a haircut.
Oh, okay, yeah, look, different than that call that we reported on last Sunday. NBC's Julia Jester is in Atlanta for us. I know, Julia, you were instrumental in getting us the information about that call last Sunday. You've just heard from the Georgia Secretary of State's office on this. What's the latest?
Hey, Alex. Another week, another call. The Georgia Secretary of State's office confirming that shortly before Christmas, President Trump called the state's chief elections investigator to, quote, find the fraud, saying that that official would be, quote, a national hero if that individual did so. And this came shortly after his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, visited the state as Cobb County was conducting its signature match audit. Now, this call is slightly different from the one that he had that you just mentioned with Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, in that this call between Trump and the chief elections investigator was during an ongoing investigation, the Cobb County signature audit, which the results found 99.99% accuracy in the processes here. So a little bit different circumstances, but nonetheless, this is yet another attempt by the president to interfere in Georgia's elections process. He called Governor Brian Kemp. He's called Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. And this new call just shows the lengths that he was willing to go to try to overturn the results here in this state. Now, the White House is declining to comment on this call, but we'll see if there are any legal ramifications for this moving forward. Alex?
Okay, Julia Jester, thank you very much for that update on the breaking news. Meantime, the House could introduce articles of impeachment as soon as Monday, but what would that process look like with just 11 days left in Trump's presidency? Joining me now, Democratic Washington Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. I'm so glad to see you. We're going to get to the reason why I'm particularly glad to see you safe and sound, given some video we're going to share, but let's get to this. What is going to happen this week? How will this move more quickly than when Trump was impeached last year? And that report you just heard from Julia Jester, can that be included in all the allegations of impeachable offenses against this president?
Alex, thanks so much for having me on. I think the situation we're in is that we fear for the safety and the security of our country for every day that Donald Trump remains in the White House. We saw that he incited, abetted, and fueled the insurrectionists who overtook the Capitol, the most brutal and violent assault on the United States Capitol since the War of 1812. And Donald Trump was at the center of making that happen. In fact, today, protesters are saying, insurrectionists that are being arrested are saying that they did it because Donald Trump asked them to. So everyone else is very clear about how that mob of insurrectionists came to the Capitol. So we cannot close our eyes to this. We need to remove this president immediately, and we are pursuing multiple options. Of course, we have written to Vice President Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment. It appears that he does not want to do that at this point. It would be the quickest, easiest way, frankly, to remove the president. But short of that, and I believe that he's not going to do that, we will have to introduce articles of impeachment. That final decision has not been made, but they can be introduced as early as Monday onto the House floor. They will be crafted very narrowly. I am a co-signer to these articles, so I have seen the language. It is really around one article of incitement of insurrection. It does reference Georgia. It was a previous Georgia call, not this one. Perhaps we can update it. But the article is very narrowly crafted. So we are very clear that this is about what happened on January 6th. There were breadcrumbs. It was not breadcrumbs. It was giant loaves of bread on this path that led us to where we are.
Before we even get to the Senate taking it up, how much Republican support do you need to get this through the House?
Well, we can pass it through the House with a simple majority. It'll come up as a privileged resolution, which means it bypasses the Judiciary Committee, which is the committee of jurisdiction that I sit on. It will go straight to the floor. There will just be a simple hour of debate on a privileged resolution. So it can pass as early as Monday or Tuesday, probably Tuesday, and then go straight to the Senate. Now, of course, Mitch McConnell would have to take it up, and we don't know whether that will happen. I do believe there may be some Republicans that vote with us on this narrowly crafted article of impeachment this time, because there are some of them, including Adam Kinzinger and others, who have said that they believe that Donald Trump is a danger in the White House. And I think we have to, we need the country to understand that this is not a partisan issue. This is about the safety and security of our country, leaving the codes, the nuclear codes, and the all control of our law enforcement, our intelligence agencies, our Defense Department in the hands of somebody who is truly unhinged. That is absolutely unthinkable. But of course, we've known for some time that this is the case. But what happened on the 6th is just hard for anybody to have imagined.
Oh, absolutely. But if you look at the calendar, and again, I'm just looking at this from a logistical, very practical perspective, say that or make the assumption that it passes the House, you've got the Senate not back in session until the day before the inauguration on the 19th. Do you think, is there any indication that Mitch McConnell would be willing to reconvene the Senate prior to then to get this going?
Well, not at this point, but as you know, Alex, everything has been very fast moving. Yeah. And I can't imagine that Donald Trump wants to be a president who gets impeached twice by the U.S. House of Representatives. So while I understand that people don't think Mitch is going to bring it up, or that Vice President Pence is not going to invoke the 25th, or that Donald Trump won't even resign, I think we have to continue to do everything we can to highlight the danger to the country and to take the action that we in the House of Representatives need to pass. We can't be thinking about what the Senate does, frankly. We have to sound the red alarm about the danger we are in. For anybody that didn't watch the proceedings on the 6th and see what happened, it was horrific, absolutely horrific.
And the reason I said I'm awfully glad to see you safe and sound is because during the chaos on Capitol Hill Wednesday, you are right there. We can see you in the gallery overlooking the House floor. First of all, did you ever dream that you would be in that position? And what goes through your mind when you think about whether or not rioters could have gotten even further than they did? I mean, did you fear a personal attack?
I did, and many of us in the gallery did. And in fact, we're all dealing with and processing those emotions right now in the days after this attack, this assault. We could hear the people banging on the doors that separated us from the insurrectionists. We heard the shots being fired into the chamber below us. All of the other members have been taken off the floor, but because we were in the gallery, we were not able to be taken out. And so we watched the entire thing unfold and didn't know, frankly, if we were going to be able to get out or not. And so I think it was extremely difficult. When we finally did get out, it was some 45 minutes, perhaps an hour after all the other members were taken off. We were finally ushered out very quickly, and we saw some of the insurrectionists who were spread-eagled on the floor right next to us as we had to walk down the stairs. Wow. Surrounded by Capitol Police with guns. So those were the people that were trying to get in the doors. But we could hear the chaos as Capitol Police were saying, "Do you have the keys?" I mean, we didn't know if the doors were going to be able to be locked. And so it was quite terrifying. But honestly, the fear I feel is for the country. You know, I'm an immigrant woman of color, and I don't have, to see the Confederacy rising, I don't know how to say it any more clearly, with Confederate flags planted on the United States Capitol, a noose hanging down, and violent armed militia who came very prepared with a plan, knew exactly where they were going and exactly who they were trying to target. That is terrifying to me.
You are also a very strong and brave congresswoman from Washington and a friend to this show, Pramila Jayapal. Republican Senator Ben Sasse says that the president was delighted by scenes he saw playing out on television when his supporters stormed the Capitol.
I think Donald Trump wanted there to be massive division, and he was telling people there was a path by which he was going to stay in office after January 20th. That was never true, and he wanted chaos on television. As this was unfolding on television, Donald Trump was walking around the White House confused about why other people on his team weren't as excited as he was, as you had rioters pushing against Capitol Police trying to get into the building. As it was happening, he was delighted.
Joining me now, Michael Beschloss, MSNBC presidential historian. Michael, Please try to make sense of what we just heard the senator saying. First of all, has this ever happened before in the United States? Has a sitting president been delighted by scenes of chaos and carnage?
Never, ever. We've never had a rebellion like this, an insurrection that was encouraged and maybe planned and executed by a president of the United States. We don't know that yet, but this is a president who, you know, Alex, you and I saw that speech he gave on the ellipse. He told those crowds to go up to the march up to the Capitol, stop the counting of the ballots and the stolen election, so-called, which was not stolen. And later on, from the White House told them, we love you, we think you're special. No one's going to say that Trump did not authorize and possibly plan this. But the other questions linger. Was this an assassination attempt against the vice president, against the Speaker of the House, others in the line of succession to Donald Trump? Were these people trying to steal those mahogany boxes? Was this a coup attempt? Why did law enforcement allow this terrorist mob to get into the sacred precincts of our capital? And also, were there ties between this effort and a foreign government? All those are big questions. We now have to refer them to the courts, to Congress, and to the next president of the United States, maybe a commission. And one more thing, Alex, if I might add to this. 14th Amendment of the Constitution says that if you're a member of Congress, senator or representative, and you have aided an insurrection, you can't sit in Congress. As far as I'm concerned, that may very well define Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, others who were involved with this. Congress is going to have to look very hard at these people and say, are they allowed to continue in Congress under our Constitution?
Michael, I want to draw on your expertise with history, because we have talked about this and the War of 1812 and the British troops that were setting fire to the Capitol in 1814. But can this particular attack on Wednesday, can that be compared to the actual coup d'etat that took place in 1898? It was the Wilmington insurrection. Right. And that's when a white supremacist mob in North Carolina overthrew the very first multiracial government just a couple days after the election.
That's exactly right. And they committed a terrorist wave against black people in the area, against black citizens, stole their property. And that could happen in 2021 in any town or city in this country. We've got to guard against it. The other thing is that, you know, keeping that in mind as a terrible part of our history, you know, we've got how many days now until Joe Biden becomes president? 11. Well, at the moment, Donald Trump is still there. He still has control of nuclear weapons. He still has the power, at least officially, to declare martial law. He still can do things with our military to get us enmeshed in an unnecessary war. It's absolutely crucial for all of us to keep an eye on exactly what he is doing hour by hour between now and the time he is out of office, whether he's removed through impeachment, the 25th Amendment, or on the 20th of January.
What do you think the impact will be of Wednesday's attack, Michael? Who will history judge the harshest? Will it be the president? Will it be those Republicans who pushed his false election claims, Democrats and Republicans, based on how they judge this event? How do you see this playing out?
I think whatever body looks into this, whether it is Congress or the courts or the president or all of them, they're going to have to decide, you know, what was this thing we saw the other day? Who was involved? Were there members of Congress who knew about it in advance? Were there members of the Trump administration whose salaries you and I pay who were plotting against our United States government and our Congress and our U.S. Capitol? We do not yet know, but those questions have to be asked. It could take years. Let's take a quick look at one of your tweets today, Michael, in which you wrote that the U.S. Constitution says no person shall be a senator or a representative in Congress who shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the Constitution or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. What's your read on how this applies today? Well, that could apply to not only Cruz and Hawley, it could apply to dozens of members of Congress who abetted this, both in the Senate and the House. You know, that's in the Constitution. That was passed because the people who added amendments to the Constitution after the Civil War knew that there would be a possibility of people who were angry at what our government did after the Confederacy had been defeated and might try exactly the kind of attempt we saw on Wednesday. They were very far-sighted. But that's the part of our law, and it's a sacred part of our law. We've got to take it extremely seriously. Some of those people may have to be expelled from Congress.
Michael Beschloss, thank you so much for the history lesson and for also the look ahead. Thank you very much.
What a week. Thank you, Alex.
What a week. That's true. More charges today in the storming of the Capitol, and authorities are asking for the public's help in finding others. We'll have the latest on the arrests for you in just a moment. We'll also explore the problem of QAnon and the breeding grounds of conspiracies, why finding a solution may be one of the most difficult challenges facing this country.